Hello. So thanks for being available for us here today, Robert. So first, I just want you to give us your name and your professional background and what assembly are you on?
Um, my full name is Robert Garvin Moore, and my background.
Yeah, your professional background. What you was
Well,
just
I'm
telling me.
I'm I'm retired now, but
Right. Mhm.
in a previous life, I had a printing business for about 15, 20 years. And before that, I was in the military. Also, while I had the printing business, I was in the reserves for a while.
Mhm. Mhm.
And now, and when we started the business, we walked into a lawsuit. After we put down all of our money, all of our savings, we walked into a lawsuit. And so right away, we learned that we didn't know anything about what was going on. So I went to law
Mhm.
school. And,
Is
but I
that
never,
what sparked you going to law school?
pardon me?
Is that the experience that sparked going to law school, or did you already go?
Yes, we walked into a lawsuit and things weren't what I expected from the courts. And so actually both of us started law school together,
Mhm.
but she had to drop out after the first year to handle all the business that we were doing. And over that 30 years, we've probably done about 300 or 200 lawsuits. But I never became a lawyer, a registered bar member. I went to law school so we could do our cases ourselves.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. So
and
that, and that's the reason why I asked you to do this particular section, because it's about um learning how to use remedies in the any of the jurisdictions that you can practice law or law. And I know you had that experience, and your sovereign movement experience goes way back. So tell me what assembly you're on, or what state you're on, and then go in and tell me what that experience was like.
well, I'm currently enrolled with California. However, I've been in Las Vegas, Nevada for the past for over a year, and so I'm in the process of switching. But while I was in California, when they had their first election, I was elected to be the justice of California, but wasn't able to actually be seated after an investigation because our lifestyle was that we would do our business in Northern and Southern California, Hawaii, Nevada, and Washington. And so over 20 years, we would go all those places almost on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
So I didn't meet the requirements, the physical present requirement to actually perform the position, and it's still difficult. Right now, we may be leaving uh, soon to Washington, and
Oh.
I don't know. So I'm moving it because even I do want to stay in California, but the problem is, well, I have a picture of, the Eaton fire burned up the whole ranch that I was supposed to live, that we were supposed to live on.
Oh.
And so all of my original documents are all burned.
Mm.
All my documents for becoming an American.
Okay.
So
Oh,
all that's gone. So, so
okay.
I got
So
that.
well, it's good it's filed on the public record, so it's there. It's
Yeah,
published.
yeah,
So you can print it down again. Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. Well, tell me, so let's go back, because I know you are a veteran here. So you were telling me before we started, 1990, was it 8? When did the fight start for you?
Well, in 1986, we uh, left Green Bay, Wisconsin. I had gotten out of the Army in '84, went to work for Procter and Gamble for 2 years. Basically, there, when you start with them, you start at the bottom. So I was a team manager, and that was a union plant. And we didn't quite agree with the cold weather up there because both of us were from California. And so And so we found this printing franchise, and we said, "Oh, you mean we could go to California and have our own business in California?" We put down the money, and so we packed everything up, moved back to California in '86, and uh, found a franchise store that was available to buy.
Mhm.
And so we bought that, and didn't realize that the owner had a lawsuit going, or an ongoing dispute with the franchisor, and we walked in the middle of that, and so that was a big story. But so went on from there and realized that other things are going on that we weren't told about.
Uh-huh. And so how did you, so from that lawsuit issue, how did you learn how to deal with the lawsuit? You said you had went to school, so which law were you studying?
Well, we had two attorneys. Because it was a standard business transaction. We bought a business, ongoing business, and we had insurance. And um, so we walked into this lawsuit, or this dispute, this ongoing dispute. And just to make a long story short, it's really detailed and complicated. But the we had an attorney from the insurance company, and we had our own attorney. And
Mm.
you know, they settled it. They settled everything. The insurance paid for everything, and all the attorneys got paid, and the guy who sold us the business got paid, and out of it, we only got about 10 or 15,000. It was like a drop in the bucket.
Mhm.
It was a you know. I remember telling the attorney, don't ever talk to me again. So it was so outrageous. So
So that led you to go and get your degree?
well, at the same time,
Okay.
somebody, one of my friends, told me that the income taxes were voluntary, and I had just come out of the military, and I'd never heard anything like that. That was just like total shock. I said, "You're nuts." But he said, "Well, you should go to this presentation." So I went to this presentation, and this guy who was giving the presentation, well, he was military, and that was Phil Marsh.
Mm.
And Anna knows about Phil Marsh, and so, but then something strange happened. Everything got raided, and they got all shut down. And then
Mm.
we had a few other instances. Immediately went into an audit with the Internal Revenue Service. We had a payment we made, and I had a check with our signature, and it's a voucher. Back then we didn't have, well, we had the top of the line computer, but it didn't work that well. We had a 20 megabyte desk compact,
Mm.
but that had an accounting software program. But we did everything manually. So we had a check, had a voucher copy of the check, but they said they never received it. So we got into a lawsuit with them. So
Mm.
everybody was suing everybody. We
Mm.
were suing the franchisor, they were suing us, we're suing the previous owner, he was suing us, the insurance tried to bug out on the insurance, so we sued them, and they sued them, and they sued back, and then the insurance, the IRS got involved, and
Mm.
they tried to force us. So that went on for 10 years. Then there was a settlement, and they were really hard on Teresa, because I went back into the Army for 2 years in a row for 6-month tours, because I had to maintain my qualifications. I was in the reserves, and so I had to continue education. But I left early the second year because they were really pressing her to settle, and that was around 1990. And then I remember we had an audit with the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, I knew that there was something up. I just didn't know what it was. So the officer was coming to the business for the interview, or for the audit. And she walks in, and I had my brother-in-law there with a camera. And we sat down, and I said, well, before we get started, I just want to let you know that we are going to be recording this because it's company policy that record any interviews that are done with the government. And so I pointed to the camera, which was behind her, and she said, I need to make a call. She goes and makes a call, and I'm sitting there. Somewhere we still have this video, and I got a grin. And she talks with her supervisor and hangs up and says, I have to leave. And I remember saying something like, well, I have 2 questions, but she walked out. So then after that, we had a gentleman who was supposed to be a partner in the business. He left, and he decided to file for, what is it? He filed for unemployment compensation, right? Well, you can't do that if you're an owner.
Yeah.
So we had to go to this hearing before a judge, an administrative law judge. I didn't know what this was all about, but we went there, and we're in this meeting, and the IRS comes in to this meeting, and so we have the whole thing, and then at the end, the judge looks over and asks me, well, Mr. Moore, Mr. Moore, do you have any questions? Any further questions? And I kind of put my hand, I leaned back, and I kind of looked over, and I said, well, what's that flag there for? You know, because I was in the military, and that was the same flag that was always displayed in the military, in my commander's offices on active duty and in the reserves. And I said, well, what's that flag here for? and she had this big thick book, and she picked it up, and she threw it down on the table and slammed it. It literally scared me. And she said, I'll take judicial notice of that. And that's sort of like the beginning, like, oh, there's something funny here. So I began asking. Anytime somebody said they were from the government, I started asking questions. And people didn't like asking the question. They didn't like me asking the question. And eventually they started levying my military pay. And I sent 2 complaints to the Secretary of the Army and Secretary of Defense. And they came back, said I had to start at the beginning. So I put in a pay request, you know, all the way at the bottom with the company pay unit. And I asked, can you provide me a copy of the warrant of distress to levy my military pay? A month later, I got the response, said, well, you can't ask that question. What do you mean I can't ask? I'm a major, and you're levying my military pay, and I can't ask that question? So it's just a comedy of errors. It just kept building from that. And so I put in another pay request, and I said, well, provide me the name of the requesting authority and the approving authority. Well, I never got a response from that. By that time, they wanted to, they were looking to get me out of the reserves. And the unit we were in was a very rank heavy. So, you know, lots of majors and above. And so during that period, let's see, that was in the early 90s. They started in 94 with this. They decided to revoke my top secret security clearance. Now, I didn't need a security clearance for this job, but, you know, it was a way to get me out. So they started administrative proceedings with this thing. And I went to a lot of different interviews over that period. And it had to do with the allegation of not paying my income tax. Well, I never dealt with any problems. That, you know, they took it out of my military pay. I didn't do anything. You know,
So you were paying it in the military already, right?
Yeah. So you know, they took all the deductions. I didn't try to claim them back or anything. But you know,
you were asking too many of the right questions.
Well, yeah, I was getting people uncomfortable, but I found out, you know, it was a very touchy. It was very sensitive asking that question. And then during that period, the early period in the early 90s, I found out about other people, and I started going to seminars. And I can't remember the gentleman who was the expert in the UCC. I remember going to a seminar. He was down on his way down, and that's when he had his heart attack. Can't remember his name, but and then I met a lot of people, and at one point, this group of guys who were going to court, they wanted me to show up in court in my military uniform. I said, well, I'll do that, but I have to ask permission from the command group. That's over in San Francisco, and that was the Army command group for the at the time I think it was 5th Army, or it could have been 6th Army. I don't remember. So I put in a request to attend this hearing, civil court hearing, in my military uniform because the people there thought there was something wrong. Well, I think that's probably the turning point, because I got, it was a resounding no, absolutely not. And so then after that, actually, it was after that is when they started the proceedings to
get rid of you.
Yeah. But I remember, there's a lot. I don't know how far you want me to go on. There's some really things that happened. So, and I'm trying to get them put into my newsletter because they do apply to us. But so I found out during that period that the IRS actually wanted to have me arrested in a brigade muster. Now, a brigade muster is pretty big. That's
what does that mean, brigade muster?
Well, it's the brigade. It's the all of the units in one, in formation, in a muster formation.
Oh, while you were in muster formation, they wanted to arrest
in
you
uniform,
and
but I think there was some sense, I guess some of the commanders had some sense, and they said, no, if you want to arrest him, you should be able to arrest him on your own. There was something, that was kind of the response, as I recall. But so then we move on from, they started that in 94, and let's see, I think in 94 we also left the Martinez area, Martinez, California, and we moved down to Carmel, California. And by that time, nothing was happening with my complaints. So I remember going out to the local IRS office with the guy who was at that time handling the levies. And so I showed up with my paper that I had written out, because at that point I was starting to figure out, I got to make some type of claim. So I wrote something out on a piece of paper, and I go out to his office and I ask for Eric Peterson. It's through this little window, and they call him. He comes up to the window, and I hold out my hand to shake him. And as I hold his hand, I pull him up to the window, and with my other hand, I shove the papers into his, to his other hand, and then I turn around and I walk out. I get in the car, and I can remember I'm in the car, and I look in the rearview mirror, and I see him. He had come out the back door, and I can remember him. He was standing there. He was so upset. He just threw the papers on the ground, and I saw him heading for his car, and I thought he was going to follow us. So we went driving around for a couple hours before we went home. But that was kind of funny. And then we move on, and then
what was in the papers? What was in the paper?
Well, we've had so many foreclosures, moved so many different times. I don't recall what it was, but it was.
Something that upset him, huh?
It was probably some of the patriotic bullshit.
Okay.
Okay. Because at that time I was learning how to what this all was all about. I didn't really have a clue, but I knew that they were taking my pay, and there was no hearing, there was no court. They just took it. Okay, so and I remember going to the pay section and talking to another major or he may have been a colonel, lieutenant colonel, so one rank above me. And he said something to the effect that, no, they don't have to. What do you mean? So what am I in the military for? What did I take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution if they can just take it without a warrant, without any hearing? It didn't make sense to me. So then we move on, and I think at that point, before we moved to Carmel, I had already had a couple incidents with the local police with driving. You know, it started with the at our HOA at the HOA. I had this van. This was back up in Martinez. I had this van, and I waited till the last minute to go down and register the damn thing. And so they didn't give me the tags. They just gave me a little piece of paper back then. It said, this is your evidence that you paid for registration. So I put that in, and they said, put that on your dash. Okay, so I put it on my dash. Well, the HOA towed the van.
Mm.
And I get back from work, and I thought someone had stolen it. And I started calling. Finally, I called the HOA and said, did you have my van towed? And they said, yes, we did. And I said, well, why? And they said, because it wasn't registered. Well, I said, well, did you think maybe to call the DMV or to call me to find out whether it wasn't registered? Because it was registered. The paper was in the car. They said, we don't have to. And they sold that van at auction. Because I didn't follow their administrative procedures. Well, that started off a whole thing with, you know, I don't know. Over the whole course of everything, I was arrested 13 times, and I had 5 automobiles taken. So the next one was really interesting. Was around 1997 when we were at Carmel. I got stopped twice on the Carmel Valley Road going to the main highway. And the first time, I think the officer just gave me a ticket and to show up at court. The second time, I didn't show up at court. And the second time, he found out that I didn't have a driver's license because I had turned it in. After that first time, I read the statutes and realized I didn't need to have a driver's license. So he decided he was going to impose punishment, and he towed my car. And I didn't go to the hearing. So finally, a sheriff comes out to the house, and he knocks on the door. My son, I think he was probably 10 years old at the time, opens the door, and the guy just walks in. And he's yelling really loud, I have a warrant for the arrest of Robert Moore. My wife stops him before he gets to the kitchen, and she tells my son to come out and get me. I was out in the garage, and I come out, and we enter into an engagement. He says, I have a warrant for your arrest. I said, well, let me see the warrant. I said, well, I don't have the warrant with me. What do you mean you don't have the, well, when he said that, well, that's when the engagement really, started getting intense. And that's when Teresa said, stop, because all the kids were, 3 little kids, real small, and she didn't want anybody to get hurt. I said, okay, I'll go with you to the jail. If you show me the warrant, show me the money, show me the warrant when we get to the jail. So they take me into the car, and they transfer me over the mountain to a fire station, and I wait there for 3 hours to get transferred to the jail. Checking in the jail, and one of their LEOs brings over a piece of paper. Back then, it was printed in dot matrix. You could barely read it. There's no signature on it. There's nothing attached, and there's no seal of a court. It's just a printout from a computer. And I just laughed. I said, you guys are outrageous. And so then, not quite sure, but it was tied to those 2 events. So I think okay, so then I decided, okay, I will go to the hearing. So I go to this hearing, and this is what was really what I'm trying to articulate in the newsletter. So I go to the hearing, and my wife is heading off to a job up in Washington, so she was going to be gone. And I get there, and it's a traffic court hearing, and they call my case. And I thought I was prepared. I thought I knew what was going on, but I walked through the bar into the center, the well of the court. And when everything settles down, this is what I say to them. I don't recognize who you are. I don't recognize the jurisdiction and venue that you move from. I don't understand the nature and cause of your process. However, if you come down from your plane and join with me on my plane under the Constitution of my government and the flag of my country, I might better understand you. Now, it kind of shocked everybody. Everybody was silent. And the judge looks over to the clerk, says, "Play that again. I want to hear it over." So, hang on.
Okay.
She answered that. Okay, so I'm there, and he plays it, and then he looks over at me, and he starts yelling, "Mr. Moore!" and really loud, "Mr. Moore, do you see this flag behind me?" And what do? I'm just a I don't know what's going on here, but college graduate, and I say, "Well, I don't see no flag behind you," and I traverse. I don't see no flag behind you. Something like that, some response. And then he calls the bailiff, and the bailiff gets a piece of paper and he brings it over to me and holds it in front of my face, and he's not yelling, but he's in a firm voice. "Mr. Moore, is that your signature on that piece of paper?" Well, of course, in school, I was quite familiar with all of the rules because we had our own thesaurus, and it was, every grade was measured against the thesaurus. And I'm looking at it, well, my signature's in the box. I said, "I don't see no signature on that piece of paper." Oh, and he was ready for that because there was 5 guys behind me, I think, 4 or 5. And he said, "Mr. Moore, I find you in direct contempt of this court, and I remand you into custody immediately." And they just latched on to me and, put my hands behind my back. They put the cuffs on, but they didn't take me out of the courtroom, which is kind of strange. And so they're moving me over to the jury box, and this place was packed. Everybody was just laughing. You couldn't hear yourself think. And the judge comes over the intercom, really loud. No, ladies and gentlemen, he is correct. I should know because I was in the military. And this is an Admiralty flag. And normally it should be displayed next to a state flag. And that's when he realized he had made a boo-boo. And he stopped talking. Of course, I made a boo-boo the first time when I made that little speech. I realized that I forgot to put my flag on. Of course, now I realize that if I put that flag on, I would have probably been in much worse condition, because that was at the time I thought the flag with the horizontal stripes was the national flag, but the one that's flown over every military installation, I thought that was our national flag, but that was incorrect. So, and I think it would have been worse if I had, so it was somebody was watching out for me. So they apparently during that hearing, they put something in my pocket. I never saw it, but I missed another hearing. And so this was in 1998. I think in March, I was in a three-day drill session at Camp Parks Reserve Center. And I get a call from my commander who says the commanding general wants to see you at 4 o'clock, be at my office by 4, or sometime after 4. And so at the end of the day, I get over there, and this is a full colonel. He's the commander of our unit. I'm a major, he's a full colonel. And we walk over together and walk up to the office, and we find out that the general is out. Now, it's interesting, the general in his civilian job was an attorney. But he happened to be conveniently missing that day. And so we're met with another colonel, and he's active duty. So I have two colonels, one active duty, one reserve. And we're here with the federal police, and he says, Major Moore, federal police is here and they have a warrant for your arrest. Oh, okay. Well, let's see the warrant. Oh, we don't have the warrant with us. What do you mean you don't have the warrant? Well, I like to see the warrant. And so they go through the procedure, putting my hands behind, putting the cuffs on, and they set me down in this chair, and I'm facing the door, you know, and so to my left is the commander's desk, and the two officers go and stand behind the commander's desk. Two colonels, one active and one reserve. And the federal policeman, he's trying to get confirmation of the warrants over the radio. And this goes on for like 15 minutes, pretty long. And but I turn to the colonels, and I say, so am I to understand you're going to surrender command and control of me, or I guess I should have said something like my office or my position, to a foreign jurisdiction without the presentment of a warrant? And they said, oh, no, we're going to get confirmation over the radio. And he can't get confirmation of the warrant from the agency that was conducting the arrest, but he did find a warrant that was like 5 years old from back in Martinez, one of those little stops, traffic stops. He found one of those 5 years old. So that's good enough. So they pack me up and they take me down the backside of the building to the cruiser. And they put me in the cruiser, and my hands are still tied. And the officer go, and they're coming into the cruiser at the same time. And we get this call over dispatch. This is Monterey County. Monterey County refuses to authenticate or confirm the warrant. Well, they were already committed. They couldn't turn around at that point. So they drive me around to the other side of the reserve, which is a federal penitentiary, and they're going to check me into the federal penitentiary. So they get me checked in. I think during that period, I'm standing there and at Parade West all the time, and every time they ask me a question, I don't consent. I do not consent. And that was the first time that they'd ever process someone in without doing the TB test, because I said, I don't consent. I do not consent. Not don't, I said, I do not consent. And, finally, they processed me all the way in. It was around 11 o'clock, and I get this message, and I thought it was a friend who had been a sheriff's deputy. And he said, you can rescind the signature or something like that. I thought it was him because the way it was written. And I know it was because it was the same thing that happened in a prior arrest back in Contra Costa County. So I said, okay, I'll sign your papers. So they checked me out around midnight, and my wife came and picked me up. We went to the guard shack to speak with the federal policeman. And he admitted that over the week, he had been receiving calls from Monterey County. They wanted him to arrest me. And he kept telling them, no, I'm not going to arrest a military officer unless you have some warrant in the system. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they were trying to that's the game. These people don't really understand what they're doing. They just follow the procedures. They get a computerized request. They don't ask questions, and they just do it. But they take the full liability until there's a signature that relieves them of liability. So that was that. And then I went to the eventually went to the trial. At that time, we were in the middle of a move, so I had absolutely nothing for my defense. But I do remember at the trial that the only evidence they asked that they tendered was a copy of my driver's license with my signature, but it appeared to have been fabricated. It was put together. It was just a photocopy. And I didn't know to object to that. So
So-
I spent 4 months in the jail there. But after that incident, that's when I realized that I was not an officer in a military. I was not. It was not. It couldn't be the American military. It was something other than that. And
So how did you get out? Did they eventually dismiss you, discharge you?
well, I was supposed to. It was 2 counts of driving with a suspended license. That's what the charge was. Now, I was only stopped for not having a seatbelt both times. But when they found out that I didn't have a seatbelt and they didn't have a driver's license, they changed it to, because those driver's licenses go for 4 years. And I had turned it in, but there was still time remaining before it expired. So they changed it to driving with a suspended license. So normally, Teresa had gone through all the records, and in the year prior, anyone with the same charge had a fine like $150 or $100 and no jail time. But my sentence was 2 counts, 6 months, 6 months in jail, and a $2,000 fine, $1,000 for each count. And but during the trial, I put in Army Regulation 840-10. You know, and I objected to the nature of the proceedings. This is a military proceeding, and this is what it says right here. That flag can only be displayed in a military court. And I can recall that when I went by the CHP office after that, they had removed their flag and the gold ball from their post. It was only temporary, and I guess the officers involved, they moved them out of the county.
So tell me, Robert.
Go ahead.
So during this time, so did you use your law education at this point, or were you just winging it?
Well, that was around that happened in 1998, and then we were still working our business, and then I think I started law school in 2002, and didn't get my degree until 2006. But
did things change after that? How you interacted with the de facto after that?
I don't remember getting stopped or arrested after that, and I kind of calmed down a little bit. I had a little bit more knowledge about it, but we had changed. By that time, Teresa was really involved in real estate, and we had so I completely forgot I was too involved in other things, and she had purchased interest in I think around by 2006 we had interest in something like 24 properties, and we started doing our own mortgage business. I remember I think it was around the end of 2007. We had a business that was doing really good one day, and the next day we were completely out of business, and we had absolutely no money to pay for anything.
And how did that happen?
Yeah, well, the companies that we were working under, they all went bankrupt, just like that. We were she had a broker's license to do loans in all the 50 states. Well, that company it tanked in one day.
No warning, nothing before?
No warning. No warning. Of course, that in 2008, and 2007, that's when everything turned.
Ah.
Okay.
Mhm, mhm.
And so we found ourselves involved in many lawsuits after that.
So give me an example. What type of lawsuits and what evoked these lawsuits?
Well, I guess so these were shared equity operations. So I guess the one that sort of kicked it all off and made it really bad. Just she, her program was to help women learn how to contract and become self-sufficient. But we didn't really check out the people that we were dealing with, and so this one was one woman that she worked with. I don't think she was fully there, and she decided that but what she paid for was gave her an entitlement to ownership interest in the property, and she started making some strange claims, and held on to the property, wouldn't pay, and it got foreclosed, and she filed a complaint, and that just one thing led to another, and
So was all of your lawsuits then after that had to do with real estate?
well, yeah, because as I recall, that's a long time ago, but I think there was at least 3 properties where people had they just sold the property, didn't even tell us, and they took all the money.
Mhm, mhm.
But it was around 2007 is where everything turned and all the values went down, but they sold that before that. And so we were ramping up in that time period between 2004 to 2009. And we were I think at one year we were dealing like, I think we had like 10 lawsuits.
Mhm, mhm.
And so, and
Did your learning in law school come in handy then?
well, you don't really learn how to do a lawsuit in law school. You just learn the basic rules. It doesn't really, without having a mentor to teach you all the tricks of the trade and what they're doing in the court. But we had seen it through our experience,
Mhm,
and and then and then we had another partner who she had a property with, and I spent a whole year working on the complaint. And we finally filed that's where the state was trying to do a quiet title, and she was on title with that property. And so they defended against that, and I think we did pretty good because on the appeal, they actually, it's very unusual to have pro pers go to the state Supreme Court or appellate court and do oral argument. So they
mhm,
both went to oral argument. But by that time, when it comes to this funny money, it tends to make people upset, and it really divides people.
mhm,
Because
mhm.
they think it's real, and it's not. And so by that time, they were both fighting each other, and they didn't have their stuff together when they went to oral argument. And
Mhm,
so it didn't
mhm.
go our favor. In fact, when I look at them, none of them, not one case, and I'm fairly certain it's close to 200 cases, did we really have anything beneficial. And the way Anna describes it, you know, she's correct.
Mhm,
It's just,
mhm,
it's debt collection. It's reparations from the Civil War. They're collecting debt. You don't have, they regard us as their property, and you don't have the right, you don't have any rights, and you don't have the power to question
mhm.
their claim of the debt.
So have you been able at this point, now that you're in the assembly and you know what you know about funny money, have you uh been approached by the de facto with tickets or income taxes or anything like that where you could use what you know now?
Well, we have several cases going. I don't know whether I should discuss them, openly, but uh,
No, you probably
you know,
shouldn't.
so you know, uh, so I do utilize the newsletter. The newsletter really helps out because it helps people understand, because now, when I was arrested back in Martinez, back then, I was arrested by high school classmates. Some of these guys were high school classmates.
Mhm.
And one of the arrests, I didn't even talk about that one. That was one of the first ones where they put me in the jail. And I had a friend who told me this is what they're going to do. They're going to try to get you to sign. Once you sign that piece of paper, they're completely relieved of any liability.
Mhm.
And so I get stopped. They take me to the jail. I didn't resist. So, I let them, they take my thumbprint, they take my picture. So they have it on there. And I'm in the holding cell. And I noticed the woman would come in and holler somebody's name, and they would always say, that's me, that's me. And they go out and sign, and they disappear.
Mm,
So,
mhm.
so I decided, well, I might test this. And so the woman comes in, she hollers, Robert Moore. And I'm just looking around, but don't know who that is. Didn't say anything,
Mhm.
but she leaves. About half an hour later, she comes in again, clipboard's folded up, and she's looking straight at me and she hollers, Robert Moore. I said, well, I don't know who that is. And I don't know, I was fixated on the fact that they didn't have a warrant for my arrest. Do you have a warrant for my arrest? And she just folds up her clipboard and walks out. And that was shift change. So then the night shift comes in, but these are men, and they're pretty, built. And I'm sitting there watching TV. By that time, I talked with everybody, and I was watching TV, and this guy's coming in. He looks at me, are you Robert Moore? And there's one of the black guys from Richmond, and he fingers me. He said, that's Robert Moore. You don't have a warrant for his arrest. Everybody's laughing. "Hey, you don't have a warrant for his arrest." And he asked me, are you Robert Moore? I said, do you have a warrant for my arrest? Are you Robert Moore? Do you have a warrant for my arrest? It goes on. And he says, and I said to him, think about what you're asking. And so he packs up and he goes out, checks his paperwork, and he comes back in with another guy with him. He says, follow me. So I didn't want to fight with him. So I follow him. And as soon as I get out the door, the guy behind me, he's trying to provoke me to take some physical act. He's pushing me,
Mm,
hitting me in the back.
mm,
I didn't fight. So they take me over to a separate chamber, and they take me in, set me down, and they keep asking me, are you Robert Moore? Take off your shoestrings. Every time they say something, do you have a warrant for my arrest? Oh, so I guess it was the last time, kind of smiled with a little smirk like that. And they just picked me up like a toothpick, and they slammed me to the ground. The one guy has his knee behind my head, and they bend my arms back. It was like slow motion when you get an arm broke or leg broke. And they put my arms back, and I crossed them, and then they filled up my legs, took off my shoes, threw them down at my
mm,
face, and then threw me, really threw my legs down, and walked out and slammed the door. And I was on the floor. Probably it took me about 15 minutes to recover from the trauma of that, to be able to climb back up on the seat and get on the seat there. And so this was like midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting there under this air conditioner. By the morning, my lips were blue, my fingernails were blue. All night long, I was sitting there. I couldn't sleep at all. And I was simply mentally trying to control the shakes so I didn't go into shakes, hypothermia. And so people came in and they say, Mr. Moore, do you recognize who I am? And yeah, these were the military officers, superiors in the reserves. But in their civilian duty, they were sheriffs. And the first thing he asked me, are you an employee? I said, you're holding me without warrant, without authority of law. And that's all I kept saying. So I don't know. I think after that, I went over to talk to this was another key issue. So I went over and talked to the police chief of Martinez after that arrest, and finally get into his office. And the first thing he says to me, "You don't have the summoning power." You know, I agree. I don't have summoning power. Of course, now I think that I do, but you know, I have to be temperament. It's more about education. So, I guess the question is, yeah, we actually have one going on right here with this place.
So is some of the education then from the assembly now that well, you don't have to tell me about the case per se, but what approaches are you using that's different now?
Well, I do attend Christy Leaper's class. Okay, and so although I haven't used the forms that she does, Eugene Pang's forms about usufruct, I've given them formal notice, and so two other people have given administrative notice to the people involved that are trying to take the property, and we went through a 3-round iteration with affidavits, so testimony in the form of an affidavit, and they defaulted with and I'm the third one, and I've incorporated their affidavits into my affidavit, and we did 3 different types of modifications in the local court, which appears to be a UN court, UN regional court, but
Does it appear to?
they've defaulted in all cases. But the other 2 people involved in the property, they're not nationals. So they've elected to go with attorneys and or different proceedings. One is finally terminated, but the other one is ongoing. I don't think they're going to be able to ask the attorney we got happens to be has a lot of experience, and he worked on the side of the mortgagers. So he has an interesting question to ask, and I don't think they're going to be able to answer it. So that's where we're at right now, and I'm waiting to give them my notice of default. But then also, and then I also have their complaint is just exactly what Eugene says. They don't have jurisdiction on the soil. It's a military jurisdiction and a commercial jurisdiction mixed, and no one has an oath or a bond or delegation of authority. So,
and that's how you approach it.
So, and I've already given the sheriff a notice, by registered mail of a trespass, because I returned their complaint to them. I did return service, and after that they came on physically, and I have actual camera footage of it, and that's all in my affidavit. So I've claimed about 2 million in trespass damages, or not, no, 20 million, I think it is. I don't remember. I can't remember. Got to look at that. But I think that if they actually took it based upon our fee schedule that's recorded, it would probably be somewhere around 5 million for this. Or actually, what Eugene said, I think 500 million. But I'd have to do that in detail, figure that out. But so far, that's where we're at. It's sort of like a default. But I like what Christy is doing. I just do a little bit differently. And so in my testimony in the form of affidavit, I had a separate paper, which I called law. It's basically a law statement where I go from the Declaration of Independence, certain quotes from the Articles of Confederation, then quotes from the federal constitution and quotes from each of the state constitutions. Because there is a case that says none of the stuff from the federal applies. Well, that makes sense because that's a British corporation. We certainly don't have any rights under that British corporation.
Mhm, mhm.
And well, of course, we know the federal republic that ceased operation, so we can't.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's why we had that case, that case report. So, but we have the states,
Mhm.
and I researching the state the Constitution for Nevada, I find that the people were given permission to write a constitution from the military. So that's
So is your
interesting.
law statement, the purpose of the law statement is to show the authority, well, where the authorities come from or really don't come from?
Well, yeah, it starts from the top, and I have some quotes there, and it talks about the fact that the people are the sovereign.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Okay, and you know, it's not those people in they are not the people in these uniforms. They're not the sovereign.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so that went to the sheriff, you know, and it talks about, and it closes with the fact that anyone acting under any of these laws, well, they have to have an oath. And I'm not sure about the bond, but I think, you know, talked about the fact, well, then I have a separate thing that I provide with that is that if anyone comes to the door, it's a mandatory notice. It went with my FISA notice also, but for them, if they come to my door, they have to fill out a piece of paper. It's mandatory. And they have to provide the information about their bond, their oath, and their delegation of authority.
Have you used
And,
that one yet?
pardon me?
Have you used that form yet? Anybody come to your door?
No,
Okay.
nobody's come to the door since then.
Okay, okay.
But the sheriff has a copy of it, the court has a copy of it. The HOA has a copy of it, but I'm gonna remind them soon. Be very clear, because I realized that because we're in a gated community,
Mhm.
and so if there's a trespass, if someone comes through that, it's not only a trespass against me, but it's a trespass against them. And so I'm thinking about ways to talk about that, because I think that the HOA, if they fail to do anything about it, it's like an accessory after the fact.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
So
So as we wind it down, I'm gonna let you go here in a moment, Robert. I think my final questions is this. Now, these experiences that you're having with the de facto, with your house, with your license, is all related to the fact that they're not recognizing us as the lawful American government, recognizing as the sovereign American state nationals.
right,
What would you advise, or what do you see has to be done for us to get that accomplished?
well, I don't think, okay. That's a good question.
That's a good question.
I think, well, let me step back one. Okay, so I've done these cases that I talked about. I've done them in Hawaii, California, Northern, Southern California, Nevada, and Washington. And it's all the same. And I've seen their summonses and their warrants, and not one of them have a proper seal. Or, and if they're signed, they don't even have they don't have the seal, the stamp seal, or the rubber stamp. And now they're no longer signed; they're just typed, and there's never a full name. And I even have one from the sheriff in LA County, and that's clearly not. Back in the early 90s, they would never show it. I don't think that the summons ever left the file. And that tells me it's all corporate. It all has to be on paper. I did a case out in Hawaii where I was trying to help a friend, and I said, well, let's go to the clerk's office and let's get an exemplification of the summons. And this guy was he was a classmate, he was a football player, and he was determined. He wasn't going to walk away without them giving it. It took an hour to get it. And it really put them on notice, because an exemplification requires a signature by the clerk, an actual signature by the clerk, and a signature by a judge attesting to the fact that the document attached is what's on file in the record. Well, they completely changed their whole system about summonses after that. So the point here is you cannot get anything from them because they know for a fact that they are not legitimate.
So it's really back on.
And they're trying to shift the liability and responsibility to those people who are ignorant, like the law, the enforcement officers who actually come out, the sheriff. So after this latest round, what I noticed is that the local postmaster, he sort of disappeared out of nowhere because I had named him as one of the respondents. And then what I noticed, I think about 2 weeks ago, the postmaster general resigned. I don't think it's necessarily for my papers, but I see that as an important part. But I think that there's enough there. What Anna's established, and the fact that we have our own bank account and we have all the assemblies going, I think that there can be a unity of effort to call a grand jury and issue a summons for an answer from one of these corporations, or to do something. And well, you know, she's already done that though with the, I think I have 120 articles that I've summarized, all of her articles to the Vatican Chancery Court. So I don't know. I think we have to proceed with what we're doing and educating everybody. We have to relearn how to honor and become dignitaries as free men and women. We have to learn how to maintain our states, and we have to understand how we conduct our cases. One of the purposes of this newsletter that I'm doing, when I see the Declaration of Independence and then the series of facts, to me that is the model for an action. It begins with the Declaration, and it's always the object is always there to maintain peace and to settle it peacefully.
Okay.
Those who don't want to, they're not going to do it, but how are we going to?
All right.
I think the last, you know, when Jefferson established the academy, and then by the military peace, what was it, Military Peace Act, you know, I think that says it all. We're not going to maintain a military. We're not maintain commerce. All this stuff, that's for everybody. We're going to maintain our peace on the soil. So I think it's really, I think what Anna's doing is probably the only thing you can do. When I was at the academy, I wrote one of the strange questions that they asked, one of the first papers you write in the first year, which kind of bugs me now that I know all this, is they asked the papers, well, what is a war? And I remember war is a state of no law. So if we want to maintain the law, we have to maintain the peace.
Excellent. That's a good note to end on, though, Robert.
Yeah, and so I think that the only thing we can do is continue developing our expertise in writing the papers and showing how these people are outlaws on what they're doing.
Mhm, mhm.
I don't think that we're gonna get anything from them because they're bankrupt. They have nothing.
Mhm.
Everything belongs to them. We are the creditors, that they have nothing. But this one paper that I'm trying to put together, I'm gonna send it to you to have you review it before I put it in the next newsletter. But you know, I did find this paper about the Committee of 300 that has George Bush's signature on it and acknowledges all of these bank accounts with one was a $999 trillion. And that definitely support, and it appears that they've stashed them away in these secret accounts,
Mhm.
and that they're trying to pretend that that they're bankrupt. You know, so it's another gross breach of the trust.
Yes, yes. So, Robert, the last thing I want you to do before we end it here is give the listeners the information so that they can sign up for that newsletter of yours. How do they sign up for that newsletter?
I don't have a website. Um,
We could put it in the when I put up the video, you can send me the email or wherever they have to go to get to the form, and we'll do it that way.
yeah, mine is just focused in on the key events that led to the formation of the American government and the creation of the federal government. There is a mirroring effect. If I'm standing here, you're there, you're looking into the screen, okay? I'm real, but the image I see is a mirror. It's not real. So the American government is the real, the federal government is the image. And they match. Just she has said that, and that's what I
All right.
see. But it's not real. Their jurisdiction is different. They don't have any jurisdiction on the soil. They have jurisdiction. There's a shared jurisdiction with the air, and then there's a jurisdiction in the land and the sea. But those are totally different. It's not the soil.
Yeah. Mhm.
So they're trying to fool people, and we have to know that, and we have to be able to articulate that to the people in our writings. It's not really, it is an issue of jurisdiction. So we have to focus in on the jurisdiction. It's not necessarily not recognizing our status as Americans. It's about jurisdiction. They don't have jurisdiction on the soil. We're of the land from dust to dust. Okay. And everyone, literally everyone in the world, definitely has to have a jurisdiction on the land, on the soil, right? And nobody else can touch that. That's sovereign. And they can't claim through fiction to claim anything that belongs to that man or woman who lives on the soil. They can't claim anything. It's all a lie. So I think we have to just learn better ways of communicating this and teaching others.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for being with us here today. Okay, we appreciate.
All right.
All
Thanks
right.
for the
All right.
call.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.